we focused on an application of Winona360, which is that we do use it as part of the classroom.
Right.
But I also think that, you know, there's the meta level of Winona360 is, you know, how do we look at teaching and engagement in different ways? And that really at its heart, Winona360 is exploring that. How does new technology shape the way we engage as a community? How does it shape the way we engage as learners and teachers? And most importantly, how do we engage as learners and teachers in a community? That's really what Winona360 is. In many ways, you know, the great challenge we're faced with in the 21st century is, will technology allow us all to become incredibly efficient soloists who have all the information that we want as individuals at our fingertips? Or will we use technology in ways that actually begins to create vehicles for creating common understanding and common value creation and common pursuit? And that's an open question. And that is what I think we have to start with in our exploration, is how do we look at media and how do we construct media in a way that builds engagement? So that, I mean, I want to lay that as the predicate. Everything else sort of comes out of that.
Sure.
Because to my mind, there's really, what's the difference between that and teaching? That is teaching. And teaching is that. And that's really what I'm interested in, is that, you know, as I say, is oftentimes I refer to this, the Winona360 project is learning in public. You know, I find every time I say it, I either say learning in public or teaching in public. So I'm flipping them all the time, and I'm just, only because I want to make the phrase shorter. But it's really learning, in many ways, it's really learning and teaching in public. You know, I mean, I suppose for me it's very hard to make a distinction between learning and teaching. I wish we had a different word. Somehow we maybe could connect the two in some way, or create an acronym that combines the two words, but I have trouble using them by themselves. So that process, and I think when we do put that process in public, that's a big step. Number one is it's yielding control of the outcome. I mean, that's a very, very important process that's happening, is that when you put it in public, who owns it? Okay? One of the things we've done on Winona360 is we've created interdisciplinary faculty blogs that faculty use in the classroom. So right now our academic theme is the big sky, and there is a big sky blog. And several faculty from different disciplines blog about the sky from their academic perspective. And then they assign it as assigned reading in their individual classes, creating this sort of interdisciplinary dialogue going on for several classes at the same time. It's also open to the public. So now, as part of that, the public is commenting and adding their own reaction. Students from multiple classes are adding their reaction, as well as the posts of the faculty. The knowledge and understanding that comes out of that, well, whose is it? Well, it's probably the community. But that's a very different form of engagement. That's not an engagement that we've traditionally been used to. That engagement has been something that's sort of been maintained or managed by a single entity in connection with others. And that, we call that model many to many. We used to work both in a media model of one to many. The media model now is considered many to many, that we're communicating in different ways and different levels, but all of that is making connections between and with several people at the same time. But then that produces an outcome that is richer and deeper and more complex than we would have been able to do in a traditional form. So that new form is very, very exciting. But it's also a form that kind of requires us to take a little different position. The position is that we don't quite control that. That we create an environment. We create a context. And when we do that, exciting things happen. And for me, that's a much richer experience. Very, very rich experience. it was actually a big change for me. That was something that I had to go through as a process personally. My majority of my career was as a photojournalist focusing on national and international stories. My job was to be the guy that went and did it. You know, I put my boots on and I put my camera over my shoulder and I went to that war zone, or I went to that hurricane, or I went to whatever that particular situation, that drought or that hurricane, and I told the story. Well, we're not in an I world anymore. That I world is gone. And for me, there was a very kind of pivotal moment that I was the editor-in-chief of a newspaper outside of Chicago by Northern Illinois University called the Daily Chronicle. And one day, over the scanner, the incredible words came across that 5 people had been shot. And we responded to the shootings at Northern Illinois University. And the journalists of the newsroom went out. At that time, we didn't even know if the shooter was still at large or how many shooters there were. And we sent a team of journalists to get there and to be on location. My first reaction was to call my wife and tell her to get my camera gear to the newspaper as soon as possible, because I was going in. Now, I'm the editor. That's not the traditional role of the editor, but that was my mindset. Well, as my wife tells the story, when she got to the newsroom, she saw me in the center of the newsroom, surrounded by what was the entire building of the newspaper, sort of on the outskirts, waiting and looking for direction. And that I became the hub, in my role as editor, for how we were going to manage this incredible news event as a team. And in that process, journalists came and went. Many of them had blood on their shoes. Many of them were crying from the experience of this. And we took moments, both individually, we took moments as a newsroom to stop and to pray for the people that had been killed and to think about what we do as journalists. And that we worked together as a team, and we created something that we were very, very proud of. That the parents and the victims' parents, victims' families, the parents of the students of Northern Illinois University and the greater community, you know, talked about what this did for them to be able to provide a basis of information that gave them knowledge or that gave them information about their own families, as well as connected them in a community. And we did something we could be very proud of. And I never left the newsroom. As a matter of fact, I never left the newsroom for a few days, except to go home for a short bit of sleep. And on that first night, I remember going home and arriving, you know, after we put the paper to bed around 4 o'clock in the morning or so. I remember crawling into bed and laying down and feeling very much of a sense of peace. That it was okay not to be the journalist on the spot. It didn't have to be my story, but that we facilitated something bigger. We facilitated something that wasn't anybody's, but that was so much better and so much richer. And I think that's true of our classrooms, that we create something that is so much richer and so much more complex because it's not ours, but that's an environment. And that new media, new technologies are shaping the way we can do that. That we didn't have the tools to be able to create that sort of instant and ongoing collaboration and these new forms of collaboration that we can create that are very effective and very valid learning forms. And so I think to the extent that we can all begin to be environment shapers, we'll create a better environment for ourselves, and we'll create a better and richer environment for our academic communities and our greater communities. Yeah, I don't, you know, that was a, you know, because that, you know, for me, I'm sure you've experienced this too, right? You know, you get all this flood of, you know, it used to be, I was like, you know, trying to block the barbarians from the gate, you know, all this citizen media, what is this crap? God, do we just have to be, you know, oh God, every Tom, Dick, and Harry's publishing some crapo photo, taking jobs away from real photographers and real journalists. But then you know, the transition was, though, if I believe in the importance of the story, then it shouldn't matter who tells it. that if I believe that the story itself is what matters, then my role is to facilitate that production. And that I can be a photographer, I can be a journalist, but I can also be the facilitator of more journalism and more photography that tells actually a richer and deeper and more complex story. And that was a big transition, because I really liked being the one. You know, in order to create a model that is ongoing engagement, technology has to be ubiquitous and accessible. Technology has to become something that is part and parcel of what our students do on an everyday basis. It's not something they think about. It's not something they have to remember. It's not something they have to afford, but rather it's something that is ubiquitous and complementing to the academic experience. When we can do that, and when we have students who are prepared in that way with those kind of tools, we have the flexibility to create models that are innovative, that are flexible, that are exciting, and that create an academic experience that is both cutting edge and also sets up the possibilities for things that we've yet to even consider. That if we're in the opposite situation, that we're conforming pedagogy to the technology access of our students, we are completely undercutting what the possibilities are for engaged process. That engaged process works because it assumes a certain technological accessibility. Without that, we're limited to the tools that we've always had. And that's what I think becomes very, very important. The way we've embraced technology on this campus is that we've embraced technology to create outcomes. We haven't embraced technology for technology's sake. I don't care if they're carrying around a laptop or a mini computer on their cell phone, but what I need as a professor is I need for that process to be inherent. That if we're having to establish a foundation of technology in order then to teach and use these pedagogies that create ongoing engagement, that would completely limit my ability and stifle my ability to do that. You know, there's another issue too, of course, which is that we are very quickly approaching a technological divide. And that we are approaching a have and a have-not. And that if universities can be a place where we're technological equals, we're creating a much better environment for our students. We're creating an environment for students who will become future technology users. Can you imagine if we were producing students who had not had the experience of working with technology on a regular basis? That we were going to leave it up to them to be able to buy and afford laptops when they graduate for the first time. Now it's part of their process. And that's a process that then they'll be able to continue. But if they graduate and they already have, and they start having bills and other things, that when will that become part of their process? And we will be confining our students to the technological illiteracy dump. And I also think access is so important. And that if we have the opportunity as a university to create a universal access environment, I think that's a very powerful thing and something we should be proud of. That otherwise we would create a tiered system. We would have some students who have like super powered laptops better than their professors, and then we would have some students that have none at all. That is not, to me, an effective learning environment.